On January 13, 2025, a piece of ice the size of Chicago broke off Antarctica. A team of researchers happened to be on a ship nearby, so when they realized what had just happened, they rushed to get there. Almost 2 weeks later, they put a camera in the water over the new ocean floor. The area they were looking at had been sealed under 150 meters of solid ice for several centuries. But what they found was not at all what they were expecting. It was full of life. Old, sponges the size of furniture, forests of sea anemones covering the rock, jellyfish with arms longer than a school bus, and when the scientists started trying to figure out how any of it was alive, they ran straight into a wall, because nobody can account for what has been feeding this ecosystem. I have covered a lot of deep ocean stories on this channel, but it is Antarctica that always keeps pulling me back. Most people picture the seafloor down there as empty. Most scientists believe that the seabed beneath the floating ice shelves would be lifeless. This was based on the idea that the ice sheet would block all light and cut off the surface food supply, so theoretically, there should be a barren floor. And for a long time, that assumption was never really tested, because getting a camera underneath a floating Antarctic ice shelf is extraordinarily hard. The ice moves, the conditions are brutal, and most of the area is simply out of reach for the equipment researchers have access to. Because of this, people believed for decades that the seafloor under these shelves wasn't scientifically important, mostly because no one could directly study it. But that changed on January 13, 2025, and what this expedition found is going to take years to fully understand. In this video, I want to walk you through 6 things they found when that iceberg broke loose, starting with the biggest mystery and building from there, because every point in this story actually makes the next one harder to explain. See? Nobody can explain what's been feeding this ecosystem. The way deep-sea ecosystems normally work is through a process called marine snow. A steady, quiet shower of small bits of dead things floats down from the top, feeding the animals that live deep below. It is their entire food supply. Every worm, every sponge, every crab sitting on the seafloor a kilometer down is ultimately dependent on this material falling from above. It is a slow process, almost impossibly slow by the standards of anything we experience on land. But it is constant, and for most of the deep ocean, it is what keeps everything alive. But when you put a 150-meter slab of solid ice over the top of that whole system, everything stops at the surface level only. It blocks the light, so photosynthesis stops, organic matter stops being produced, and the rain of particles from above essentially stops too. The seafloor beneath the George VI ice shelf has been in that condition for a very long time, possibly centuries. So the scientific expectation going into this area was a quiet, mostly empty floor. Maybe some microbial life is clinging on, but nothing like what a normal deep-sea site would support. The expedition itself almost didn't happen the way it did. The RV Folklore was already in the area conducting a separate research program when the iceberg broke off. The team was actually dealing with more sea ice than expected, which had been slowing their original work down. Someone checked the satellite images and noticed a crack had formed along the edge of the George VI ice shelf, about 30 kilometers away. They noted it down but didn't worry too much. Cracks can take weeks to produce an iceberg, but when the next batch of satellite images came through a short time later, the iceberg had already broken free. The team made the call to go. They rerouted, pushed through, and reached the site 12 days after the calving. ROV Sebastian went in first. It is a remotely operated vehicle that can go down to 4,500 meters and stream live video back to the ship. The team watched from above as the ROV descended, and when the cameras turned on at the bottom, the first thing they saw was a large sponge with a crab on top of it. And then more sponges, corals, sea spiders, anemones covering the rock in dense groupings. The cameras kept going and the animals kept appearing. The scientists watching the live feed were not quiet about it. They were audibly surprised. One researcher described it as going into a complete unknown and said the degree to which life was doing well down there was genuinely shocking. The sponges are what really make this hard to dismiss as a fluke. Sponges in cold, deep water grow incredibly slowly, sometimes less than 2 centimeters per year. Some of the specimens the team documented were large enough that based on known growth rates, they would have been alive and growing for hundreds of years. Sitting there, in total darkness, without a food source that anyone can currently identify or confirm. The team's best guess right now is that deep ocean currents are somehow routing nutrients into the site from elsewhere. But that has not been confirmed. The actual mechanism keeping this place alive is still genuinely unknown. Dr. Patricia Esquete, who co-led the expedition, put it simply. She said they did not expect to find such a beautiful, well-established ecosystem, and that based on the size of the animals, the communities had clearly been there for decades, maybe even hundreds of years. The sponges that were alive when the cameras found them were already old when Columbus crossed the Atlantic. And we had no idea they existed. The team also suspects that several of the animals they documented may be species completely new to science. Some of the anemone formations they found had never been described before. The identification process takes years of laboratory work, comparing samples against known records, so there are no confirmed new species announced yet. But the researchers were clear that they saw things down there that did not match anything in existing catalogues, which means this one iceberg carving may have opened the door not just to a new ecosystem, but to animals that have never been named. The ecosystem here is already out of the ordinary, but the creatures themselves are what truly make it feel alien. It all begins with a fish that essentially discards all known biological rules. Every vertebrate on the planet has red blood cells. Every fish, every bird, every mammal, every reptile. It is one of the most consistent biological facts across 400 million years of life on Earth. Red blood cells carry oxygen through the body using a protein called hemoglobin, which is also what makes blood red. This system is so fundamental, so deeply built into vertebrate life, that scientists had not found a single exception to it until they looked closely at the Antarctic icefish. The icefish has no red blood cells at all. Its blood is clear, transparent. If you drew a sample and held it up to the light, it would look like water. When you see footage of a live one, the whole body looks pale and almost ghostly because the same transparency extends through the skin. You can faintly see through it. It looks like it was assembled from frosted glass. The reason this happened comes down to temperature. The Southern Ocean around Antarctica sits at around -2 degrees Celsius, which is actually below the normal freezing point of water. The water stays liquid because of its salt content, but for a fish living in it, that temperature creates a real problem. At that cold, normal blood thickens and flows poorly. The hemoglobin that works fine in warmer conditions becomes a liability in the deep Antarctic. So over millions of years, the icefish lost it. But blood without hemoglobin does not carry oxygen. So the body had to find another way to keep working. And what it came up with is honestly remarkable. The heart grew. Not a little, but a lot. The heart of an icefish pumps roughly 5 times more blood per stroke than a similarly sized fish with normal blood would need to. The total volume of blood in the body became proportionally enormous to make up for the fact that each unit of it was carrying far less oxygen than normal blood would. And then, on top of all that, the icefish started absorbing oxygen directly through its skin from the water around it. Cold water holds significantly more dissolved oxygen than warm water does, so the ocean itself became a kind of external lung for the fish. Every surface of its body is pulling oxygen in. There is also an antifreeze protein in the blood that prevents ice crystals from forming inside the body tissues. Without it, at those temperatures, the fish would essentially freeze from the inside. The protein works by binding to tiny ice crystals as they begin to form and stopping them from growing. It is the same principle as adding salt to a road in winter, just happening at a molecular level inside the bloodstream. What makes this even more interesting is that this antifreeze protein is not inherited from some ancient ancestor. Genetic studies suggest the icefish developed it independently, which means the exact same biochemical solution to the same problem evolved from scratch in this environment. Evolution, given enough time and pressure, can arrive at surprisingly specific answers. In terms of behavior, the icefish is an ambush predator. It sits on the seafloor almost completely still, sometimes for very long periods, and then moves fast when prey comes into range. It feeds mostly on krill and smaller fish. The males are also notably attentive fathers, staying at the nest and actively defending it, which we will come back to in the next point. But the thing I keep coming back to when I watch footage of icefish is just how rum it looks in the most interesting way. It is unmistakably a fish in its structure. It has fins and scales and a recognizable fish shape. And yet something about it sits just slightly outside what your brain expects. Like a copy of something familiar made with the wrong materials. There are currently 16 known species of icefish, all of them living in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica. They all share the clear blood and the enlarged heart. Some are more transparent than others, some are more active hunters, and some are more passive. But they all represent the same evolutionary solution to the same problem, which is how to be a vertebrate in water that should, by normal biological standards, be too cold to function in. The icefish is already a strange enough animal on its own, but it does not live alone down there. And when you find out the actual scale of how many of them are packed into one location, you would take a moment to actually process it. In January 2022, scientists on the German icebreaker Polarstern were running a routine survey in the Weddell Sea. They were towing a baited camera system over the seafloor. Icefish nests started appearing on the footage. Each one was a simple circular depression in the sediment, maybe 75 centimeters across, cleared of loose material with a single adult male sitting at the center guarding it. They kept the camera going. More nests, then more after that. For 4 consecutive hours, across 6 full kilometers of seafloor, the nests did not stop. When the researchers finally reviewed the full footage and started doing the math, the numbers were hard to accept at first. The colony covered at least 240 square kilometers of seafloor. That is roughly the size of Philadelphia. The nest density averaged 0.26 nests per square meter, which works out to a nearly continuous carpet of nests across the entire site. Total estimated active nests, 60 million. Total fish biomass from the adult males alone, over 60,000 tons. Each nest had a male sitting in it, fanning the eggs with his pectoral fins to keep oxygenated water moving over them and attacking anything that got too close. Notothenoid fish, starfish, anything that came near was driven off. The males were doing this in complete darkness, at around 420 to 550 meters depth, in water just barely above freezing. And they were doing it for weeks at a time without a break, because the eggs take a long time to develop in that cold. When you think about the fact that each one of those 60 million nests had a male doing exactly this, the scale of the behavior taking place on that one stretch of seafloor becomes genuinely hard to picture. Orton Purser from the Alfred Wegener Institute had been doing deep-sea research for 15 years when this discovery happened. He said in all of that time, he had never seen anything like it. And that reaction makes a lot more sense when you know the context. The largest icefish nest colony ever documented before this discovery was approximately 40 nests. A group of researchers once found 40 nests in one place, and it was considered a significant find. So going from 40 to 60 million is not just a bigger number, it is a genuinely different category of discovery, the kind that makes you rethink what you thought you understood about what was down there. One detail that stuck with me is that the colony sits directly in the path of a specific water current. A slightly warmer, slightly less salty stream of water flows through the Filtner Trough, the underwater canyon where the colony lives. The fish appear to have found it and built their entire breeding operation around it, because that current carries more dissolved oxygen and slightly better conditions than the surrounding water. So there is also a sense of deliberate location happening here. These fish found the best available real estate in a very cold, very dark neighborhood, and they packed it. The ecological weight of a colony this size is also worth thinking about. A breeding aggregation of 60 million fish, covering 240 square kilometers at that kind of density, becomes a significant part of the local food web. The males guarding nests attract predators. Weddell seals feed heavily in the Filchner Trough, and it is now believed that this icefish colony is a major reason why. The seals are not just randomly passing through. They are hunting a specific location because they know, in whatever way seals know things, that the food is reliably there. The colony does not just exist in isolation, it is holding up a significant portion of the local ecosystem above it. A colony that size, spread across that much ground, you would expect the layout to be basically random. But when researchers actually mapped it in detail, what they found added a whole other layer to the strangeness. When you map 60 million nests across a site the size of a city, the reasonable expectation is that they would be scattered somewhat randomly. Animals pick spots based on individual needs and available space, and the result is usually something closer to chaos than order. That is how most animal distributions in the deep ocean look when you actually map them. So when researchers sat down with the full survey footage and started charting the actual layout of this colony, what they found genuinely surprised them and has continued to generate research interest in the years since. 6 distinct geometric arrangements appeared across the colony. Some areas had nests packed into tight clusters, others had them arranged in crescent shapes that curved across the seafloor. Some formed lines, others formed oval groupings. Some appeared as sharp, defined U-shapes, and a smaller number sat as isolated singles, separated from any cluster. One researcher described the overall picture as arcs, clusters, and solitary circles, as if the fish had mapped out a neighborhood of their own. That description sounds poetic, but it is actually just an accurate description of what the data showed. Then it gets stranger still. When the team measured the individual nests across the different zones, they found that the nests on the outer edges of each cluster were measurably larger than the ones in the interior, not by a small margin either. The edge nests were bigger, which implies that the larger, stronger, more dominant fish are taking the perimeter positions. Those spots have more exposure, they are harder to defend. If a predator approaches the colony, the edge fish are the ones that have to deal with it first. So the geometry is not just a pattern, it has a logic to it, a kind of spatial hierarchy where the fish most capable of defense are the ones who end up on the outside. The colony also has a hard border, not a gradual thinning out as you move away from the center, but a clean line where the density drops from very high to zero over a short distance. Scientists have observed this kind of sharp boundary in penguin colonies on land before, where the edge of the colony is defined and maintained by the behavior of the animals at the perimeter. But they had never seen it in a fish population. Nobody has a clear explanation for why it forms, or how the fish at the edge know to stay at the edge. A follow-up study published in 2025 in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science went back over the data and confirmed that the patterns were consistent across the whole colony and were not the result of random chance. The geometry is real, but the mechanism behind it, the reason these fish organize themselves this way rather than any other way, is still an open question. What it tells us is that these animals are doing something collectively that we do not have a proper framework to explain yet. And that is genuinely interesting, because we are not talking about dolphins or primates here. We are talking about a small, pale, transparent fish that lives in total darkness under a slab of Antarctic ice. It also raises a wider question about how much of animal behavior in the deep ocean we are simply not seeing because we are not there to observe it. The colony in the Weddell Sea was unknown until 2022. The geometric organization of it was unknown until the data was actually mapped and analyzed. How many other places in the deep ocean have populations of animals doing things that, if we saw them, would require us to completely rethink our assumptions about how those animals work? The honest answer is that we do not know. And the scale of what we do not know is one of the things I find most interesting about this whole field. Everything so far has been on or near the seafloor, but in the water column above it, the ROV picked up something that belongs to a completely different order of strangeness and a completely different timescale. During the 2025 expedition, as the ROV Sebastian moved through the water column, its cameras captured an object drifting. It is identified as Stygia gigantea, the giant phantom jellyfish. The bell alone was over a meter across, and trailing below it were 4 thick, ribbon-like oral arms, each stretching more than 10 meters in length. To put that in terms of something familiar, 33 feet is roughly the length of a standard school bus. It has no tentacles, which is unusual for a jellyfish. Instead of stinging prey, the arms do all the work. They are wide, flat, and fleshy, and they move through the water in slow looping patterns. When prey gets close enough, the arms simply engulf it, wrapping around fish or squid in a slow, patient embrace until whatever is inside stops moving. The process looks unhurried, almost indifferent, which in a way it is. The animal has no brain, no central nervous system in the way we think of one, no skeleton, no hard parts of any kind. It is essentially a large, organized collection of muscle and water with a very long track record. Jellyfish as a group have been in the ocean for over 500 million years. That number is genuinely difficult to hold. They were in the water before the dinosaurs existed, before trees, before most of what we would recognize as complex life on land had appeared. The giant phantom specifically has probably been moving through the deep ocean in something close to its current form for the vast majority of that time. Evolution has not had much reason to change it, because whatever it is doing clearly works. In all of recorded scientific history, this species has been encountered fewer than 120 times. Almost all of those sightings came from ROV cameras operating in deep water. It almost never comes shallow enough for divers to encounter. It almost never surfaces. It spends its entire existence in the parts of the ocean that we have barely started to explore, drifting along on the deep currents, doing what it has been doing for an incomprehensibly long time. The reason so few sightings exist is not necessarily because the animal is rare. Most deep-sea biologists who study it think the actual population is far larger than 120 encounters would suggest. The deep ocean covers a massive area. Most of it has never had a camera in it, and this species lives well below the depths that most research operations reach. The honest reality is that there could be thousands of these things moving through the deep right now, and we would have no way of knowing. The 120 sightings might represent a fraction of a percent of the actual population. And that is actually a bigger statement about the state of deep ocean research than it is about the jellyfish specifically. It is a reminder that for the vast majority of the ocean, we have no real picture of what is in it. Something else worth knowing is that the giant phantom has a documented relationship with small fish. Researchers have observed juvenile fish swimming inside the reach of the arms, apparently using them for shelter. The arms are dangerous to most things that enter them, but for certain small species, the jellyfish seems to function as a kind of moving cover. The fish get protection from open water predators. Whether the jellyfish gets anything from the arrangement is still not clear. It may not even register that the fish are there. Now, I want to talk about a creature whose organs don't fit inside their own bodies. See, most people have seen a sea spider at some point, probably at a beach or in a nature documentary. They are small, fragile, with very thin legs radiating out from a tiny central body. Most of the ones you would encounter in a normal tide pool are a few millimeters across at most, sometimes less. But in Antarctica, they grow to 35 centimeters, that is 14 inches, roughly the diameter of a standard dinner plate. This is called polar gigantism, and it is not something unique to sea spiders. The extremely cold, oxygen-rich water around Antarctica creates conditions where a lot of animals end up growing much larger than their relatives in warmer parts of the ocean. Giant isopods that look like enormous pill bugs and grow big enough to fill your hand. Sea worms over a meter long. Sea stars so wide you could use them as a frisbee. The whole deep Antarctic seafloor operates at a size scale that just looks different from anything you would see in warmer water. But sea spiders are the ones that tend to make people do a double take, because the gap between what you know a sea spiders look like and what an Antarctic one actually looks like is so wide that your brain takes a second to catch up. At 35 centimeters, the anatomy of a sea spider becomes somewhat absurd. The central body of a sea spider is actually very small relative to the total size of the animal. It is almost all leg, so at that scale there is genuinely not enough room inside the body for all the organs. The digestive system cannot fit, so it extends out into the legs. The gut branches into each limb, running down through the legs because that is the only space available. The animal's digestion is happening inside its own limbs as it walks. They also breathe in a way that is completely different from almost any other animal their size. Sea spiders have no gills, they have no lungs, there is no dedicated respiratory organ at all. Instead, oxygen absorbs directly through tiny pores that cover the entire outer surface of the body, including the legs. Every part of the animal is pulling oxygen in from the surrounding water simultaneously. The cold Antarctic water holds so much dissolved oxygen that this is actually enough to keep a 35-centimeter animal alive and active. In warmer water, this system would not work at all. The lower oxygen content would mean not enough getting in through the skin. But down here, it does. Antarctica has more species of sea spider than anywhere else on Earth by a significant margin. They are one of the most common animals on the Antarctic seafloor. Researchers on the RSV Nuina, Australia's icebreaker research vessel, have pulled them up in trawl nets alongside giant sea stars and isopods, and the footage of that always gets a reaction. Because you can prepare yourself intellectually for the idea of a 35-centimeter sea spider, but seeing one next to a human hand in real life is a different experience. You recognize the shape immediately, the thin legs, the small central body, the way it moves, and then the scale just does not match anything your experience has prepared you for. What makes the polar gigantism story particularly interesting is that researchers are still not completely settled on why it happens. The leading explanation involves the combination of cold water, high oxygen levels, and slow metabolic rates. Cold water holds more oxygen, so more of it is available to fuel growth. Slow metabolism means the animals live longer and have more time to grow. But there are other theories too, including one that suggests fewer competitors and predators in the deep Antarctic give animals more room to reach sizes that would be selected against in warmer, more competitive environments. It is probably some combination of all of these things, and the honest answer is that it is still being worked out. One thing that does seem clear is that the Antarctic seafloor has had a very long time to develop these animals, without much interference. The continent has been isolated by the Antarctic circumpolar current for around 34 million years, and the deep seafloor communities have been building in relative undisturbed conditions for most of that time. So what you are looking at when you see footage of Antarctic sea spiders, or giant isopods, is the result of tens of millions of years of evolution running in a relatively closed system, going in directions that the rest of the ocean's animal life simply did not go. The broader effect of all of this is that the Antarctic seafloor feels like a genuinely different world when you see it on camera. The scale of everything is just slightly off from what you would expect. Big worms, huge starfish, sea spiders the width of a dinner plate walking across the rock, an icefish sitting motionless with its pale, almost see-through body, dense fields of sponges that have been growing for centuries. It does not look like any other seafloor footage I have seen from anywhere else. And that gap between what you expect and what you're actually looking at is honestly what this whole video has been about. If you have made it so far, then make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel.